Hello and welcome to the Investment Climate Podcast. I'm Margaret-Ann Splawn and I invite guests to explore and debate the investment climate most conducive for private sector participation in climate finance. I'm grateful to work with some iconic institutions, organizations, and people in the climate space. And the purpose of this podcast is to share lessons learned, increase transparency, and break down the barriers of communication with a view to increasing climate action. In today's episode, we'll be exploring what it's like to become a partner of the world's biggest climate fund. Did you know that it takes an average of almost 2 years to become an official delivery partner? The United Nations Green Climate Fund, or GCF, was conceptualized at the Cancun COP in 2010 and fully operational since 2015. The GCF is a unique global platform designed to respond to climate change by investing in low emission and climate resilient development. It is the largest climate finance fund in the world, targeting the commitment of funding flows of $100 billion per year with all pools of finance, including large and untapped pools of private finance. One of its specific mandates is to encourage and facilitate private investment in climate-related activities. The GCF aims to go much further than other public climate finance institutions in leveraging private capital for mitigation and adaptation, and using its own risk-bearing capacity to enable innovation and funding at scale. So you might be thinking, well, that all sounds great, but how does it work? Well, the GCF relies on its own network of partners to deliver results across the spectrum of climate action. These partners span multilateral and national banks, international finance institutions, development finance institutions, UN agencies, conservation organizations, equity funds, government agencies, regional institutions, and more. These suppliers are known as accredited entities, and they partner with the GCF to implement projects. Guided by the GCF's investment framework and the priorities of developing country governments, accredited entities convert concepts into action. Accredited entities can be private or public, non-governmental, subnational, national, regional, or international, just as long as they meet the standards of the fund. Accredited entities carry out a range of activities that usually include the development of funding proposals and the management and monitoring of projects and programs. For those that aren't aware, becoming an accredited entity or partner at the GCF is no easy feat. It takes a long time, and it's not easy navigating the requirements of the GCF, especially if you're a private sector entity. But it's obviously possible, as evidenced by currently 103 partners approved for accreditation. However, less than 25% are private sector entities. So today, we are going to explore what it's like to become an accredited entity at the GCF with Karl Upston-Hooper, General Counsel at Camco Clean Energy. Camco Clean Energy is a climate and impact fund manager, leading the clean energy transition in emerging markets. Having spent over 30 years in Africa's renewable energy sector, the company provides project developers and financiers with a unique combination of global access and local presence, offering practical and bespoke financing solutions that pair the discipline of a development bank with the agility of a small private company. Karl Upston-Hooper led Camco's successful application to become an accredited entity at the GCF. Camco is also a member of the Climate Markets and Investment Association, which is a membership organization comprised of private sector companies where I serve as executive director. Camco is CMIA's newest member at present, and I thought it would be interesting to learn what it's like to become a partner of the GCF. Let's listen into Camco's journey. Karl, allow me to welcome you to the show today. Camco is the Climate Markets and Investment Association's newest member at this point. We're delighted to have you join us, and you've recently been approved by the board of the Green Climate Fund as an accredited entity. So let's start at the beginning. Why did the Camco team want to become an accredited entity at the GCF?
It actually started with a funding opportunity that we were involved in that was going to go to the GCF. It then opened our eyes to the possibility and, to a degree, the limitations of working through the existing accredited entities. And we realized there was perhaps a gap for a slightly more nimble, more commercial accredited entity that would probably be a bit more in line with what we were used to in the private sector. So we made the decision to give it a go. And yeah, I mean, it's a long road, but we're very happy that we did.
You mentioned a long road. How long did this process take for you? And were there any particular hiccups that you guys faced?
I think in total it's taken us just over 2 years, and I think that we're very grateful for the support that we had from the Secretariat and the accreditation panel. But fundamentally, the process isn't really designed for an organization like ourselves. Most of the other accredited entities are large multinational development banks, large commercial banks, or very single issue NGOs. So to a degree, we're a little bit of a square peg in a round hole, and we had to adjust our internal organization slightly, but also we had to go through a process of reciprocal learning with the Secretariat as we tried to explain what we do and what we intend to do, and they had to fit that within their accreditation process, which, like I say, we were not perhaps a natural fit for the process as it was originally designed.
And my dealings as well with the Secretariat has been really good, very positive. However, I've heard from other accredited entities that it's a tricky process, particularly when you're a private sector organization. And how many people in your organization worked on this then, worked on the accreditation?
We had a core team of 3 or 4. We had myself as lead of the process, but we also had a dedicated project manager. But the accreditation process, when you're trying to fulfill all of the fiduciary standards that the GCF has, I mean, an accredited entity is effectively stepping into the shoes of the GCF in relation to GCF funding. At that point, you're touching really all aspects of our organization, our finance manager, our impact manager, our risk manager, our origination manager. All of these people are having to contribute thinking and materials, rewrite policies, design processes. My job is a little bit more as like the conductor of the orchestra to kind of bring all these pieces together. It really was breadth of the company. And I would say at times on our coordination calls, we had 7, 8, 9 different parts of the company putting their outputs into the accreditation system.
Well, that's interesting when you think about all of the people that are required to make this happen. Not just a monetary point of view, because there are fees attached to this, but also from a time and effort and energy point of view. Was there anything that stood out or any particular lessons learned that you might have done differently had you known or approached it differently?
I think there were at times cross communications between ourselves and the Secretariat, the accreditation panel, about the way that we spoke about various things. What is lending is a pretty obvious one, the difference between projects and programs. And it really did take, I think, quite a number of conversations for us to align the terminology and be on the same page. Part of that was, I guess, our newness to the accreditation panel, and that we were not the type of accredited entity they were used to dealing with. And it took perhaps 6 months for us to really feel that we were speaking a common language and to understand their requirements in depth. But, again, hats off to the accreditation panel in terms of the flexibility that they did show to us. We faced it wasn't just, like you say, the fees and the opportunity cost of the time, but it was also quite a strategic decision about the future of the company, because there were processes that, as a relatively nimble, innovative climate finance manager, we didn't actually need in the here and now. But as part of the accreditation process, we were future proofing the company for dealing with managing on behalf of the Green Climate Fund, funding in a very different light than our existing investment mandates. And that was a strategic call that the board of Camco made, is that, yes, perhaps this is onerous, perhaps this is a little bit inappropriate, but it is the direction that we want to go. Not a lot of small private organizations have a public grievance procedure, for example. That's something you normally find on a public organization where there is a sense of, the rights of natural justice require it. But again, in terms of meeting the fiduciary standards, that's something that we had to develop, and we're very happy to develop that. But there were a lot of those sorts of things where we had to think, this is the direction that we're going in. We want to add ourselves to the toolbox of the GCF board, of the mitigation, adaptation, funding, climate finance world, joining CMIA. And as a consequence, we did need to go above and beyond where we currently were in terms of our operations, for sure.
Thanks for that comments as to why you were doing that. And strategically, it's very interesting when you mention that strategic you do this, because I spoke with your CEO, Jeff Sinclair, last year when Camco was coming up for accreditation. And Jeff's a great guy, very knowledgeable in the climate space. And I've known Jeff for years now. As you're aware, but maybe others listening on the podcast might not be, I'm the active private sector observer at the GCF, representing the developed nations constituency. So I try to get to know the accredited entities, and particularly the private sector accredited entities. I'd mentioned to Jeff that I was surprised that Camco hadn't applied as a direct access entity rather than as an international accredited entity. And he told me that you initially had been put forward as a direct access entity by the South African government, but that due to the funds rules, Camco had to go down the international accredited entity route instead. Can you share a bit more about this?
Yeah, so we have offices in Johannesburg, Accra, Nairobi, London, and Helsinki, and we are big believers in the philosophy of the GCF of country-led initiatives, of stuff being built, locally ground up rather than parachuted in from Europe. And we thought it was a natural fit, given our Johannesburg office, for us to be a direct access entity, and we're very grateful for the support of the DBSA. But it turned out, because the actual accredited entity would be Camco Management Limited, which is a UK registered company, that the Secretariat, in effect, guided us towards international accreditation. There's no real difference in terms of what our accreditation conditions are. We're accredited in the small and medium category for B and C ENS risk at an international level. So it didn't impact, or it will not impact our future activities. But it's a kind of a little bit of a quirk of geography and establishment more than anything. We will look forward to working with direct access entities, and our policy and partnerships manager is, as we speak, reaching out to the various countries that we intend to work with to continue to strengthen those relationships, so that we are making sure that our projects are delivering what is actually sought on the ground locally, rather than, an idea from a boardroom in London.
So that's very interesting to hear. And what are your next steps now that you're accredited? What types of projects are you looking at, and how is this going to work in the real world, do you think?
Well, yeah, I was listening to the board meeting, live streaming it in the car. I had stopped on the side of the motorway when they got to our name, and really the first thing to do was to call the team and congratulate them, because it had been a Herculean effort over the last couple of years. Then we had a little bit of a process on formalizing the accreditation master agreement, which we've now done, and that's signed. We have some conditions in our accreditation master agreement, which are, ongoing in relation to providing copies of, our sustainable business committee's minutes, and these sorts of evidence that we are indeed complying with the fiduciary standards. But now we've got to the more exciting part, in that we're developing our entity work program. So, as I'm sure you know, but for the benefit of listeners, each accredited entity has an entity work program, which it submits to the Secretariat, indicating what its priorities are in the short to medium term. And of course, that needs to be aligned with country strategies. So we're developing that. We've got a suite of we think, really exciting projects that we want to move through to funding proposal. We're not the world's largest organization, so we're trying to be humble and recognize that, this will be a handful of opportunities, and now that we are an accredited entity, I do get a lot of emails with different ideas, and it's a shame that we can't do them all. But we've picked a group that we think will really be transformational and meet the goals of the GCF and the goals of countries' NDCs. So we're writing them up into the entity work program. We will agree that with the Secretariat, and then we will start submitting concept notes and funding proposals. We hope to submit at least a couple of concept notes at the second meeting of the GCF board this year. Obviously, the first meeting is just coming up in March. And then that's only the beginning, because, of course, if we're fortunate enough to receive funding from the GCF for these project ideas, we need to organise a transactional relationship with the executing entity, which in a couple of them is ourselves, and then, do what we do, which is get the projects to happen and get the money deployed and get the impact that was promised. Report it, be transparent about it, and then hopefully develop a reputation as an accredited entity that can deliver and deliver promptly. And I think that's the advantage of being a small organisation, is that we would hope that our response times, both to the GCF and to the project investees or project owners, is a little bit ahead of what they have traditionally expected from the large DFIs.
And could you share even one of the types of projects that you're currently developing a concept note on, or?
Maybe a couple. I mean, obviously the details are a little bit sensitive, but one of the things that we have really a strong focus on is gender mainstreaming and really enabling the women entrepreneurs, particularly in Africa, which is our strongest geographic focus, to have the capital and resources that they need to be the entrepreneurs that they want to be. So one of our concept notes will be a equity gender fund designed to enable women entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa to develop climate solutions. It's probably in the initial stages not going to be the largest funding request from the GCF. We are able to make funding requests up to $250 million US. This will, I think, start off more modestly than that, and led by Laura Lati, our impact manager, who is based in Johannesburg. We would hope to develop with the GCF and some other delivery partners a product where we can move beyond small scale grant funding to the sort of business funding, the real genuine commercial corporate funding that some of these really very innovative community-based women-led projects need to reach scale to have the impact that we think that they can. So that's one really exciting concept note that we're working on. And like I say, we've got about 5 or 6 at the moment, some with other delivery partners. And yeah, I think the team is all in all pretty excited about the actual doing part of the GCF, having got through the accreditation part.
Well, that's interesting when you talk about the actual delivery. Now, have you been approached by non-accredited entities potentially looking to partner with you because of your accreditation at the GCF?
Yes, I mean, we have been approached a lot, I must say, and it is a little bit of something that we're having to refer people to other accredited entities if they are operating. I had an email about a project in Afghanistan, which sounded a very sensible project, but it was in the adaptation space and it's in Afghanistan, which neither are our core competence. So I simply suggested to the person that there were maybe a couple of other accredited entities that would be more appropriate. We're getting maybe a 2 or 3 a week, I would say. And I think a lot of people are perhaps attracted to the idea that, I mean, I'd like to think we're a little bit more approachable than some of the big multinational development banks. But yeah, I mean, we try to help everybody, even if it's not necessarily as an accredited entity. And I think sometimes, it's a matter of referral, or sometimes it's even upskilling people about the requirements of the GCF, because they need to make sure that they've got national country ownership. And so, there's a bit of an email exchange, and does your local NDA know about this and are they supportive? But, we're very happy with the project suite that we've got. And I think we probably need to focus on delivering some of that and building our reputation and knowledge and experience, in all honesty, as an accredited entity, because, I think this is a journey for us as well. We've got through the accreditation stage, but I think we should remain humble. And on that note, I must say we've had some really very positive support from other existing accredited entities, and we're all a kind of large family trying to achieve the same thing. So we've had some nice knowledge sharing from people who have gone through the process. That's been perhaps a little bit of surprising, but a really pleasant part of the last couple of months.
Well, that's great to hear. With regards to it is true, you are a smaller organization who've gone through this. What do you see then as Camco's strengths or expertise that you particularly bring? Because as a smaller organization, while you're nimble, every person, I would say, counts more than in a larger organization. Do you have any particular strengths or expertise you think that Camco brings specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate to be the manager of the Renewable Energy Performance Platform, which is an initiative funded by the UK government to develop small-scale renewable energy in sub-Saharan Africa. And like I think I said earlier, we have, on-the-ground people in Accra, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. So I think that we're in a pretty good space in terms of knowledge of small-scale renewables, microgrids, commercial industrial solutions, solar home systems, on-grid, off-grid renewables. Sub-Saharan Africa is really our core expertise, and it's a very lived one. It's not a theoretical one. It's, this is what the team does every day. We have a great project, for example, in Burundi, that the team has worked very hard on and is now, almost at commissioning, being the first IPP in Burundi since independence, I believe. And that rep experience, I think, has given us knowledge of the regulatory frameworks, a great network, a great sense of commercially what is sustainable, because as a philosophy, as a company, we're not that keen on grant-based solutions that maybe don't build an ecosystem. I mean, there is a place for grants around technical assistance and getting people through an early development stage. But if you want to move a country into a low carbon solution, you have to use private finance, which I'm sure is preaching to the choir with you. And it has to be sustainable. You have to develop all of the skills and knowledge around that sector in commercial banks in country, with regulators in country, with developers, with service providers, and so on. And I think we're pretty tapped in to that. We also have some really interesting initiatives in the Caribbean and are looking at rolling out similar small scale products in an island specific sort of sense where a lot of these technical solutions make sense. But so yeah, I mean, I think that the GCF has a very broad mandate. It has its 8 key areas. It's fair to say that our initial focus is on the energy key area, perhaps with the addition of transport and water. But I think that the best approach for us at the moment is to stick with what we know, and to build that depth of experience around delivering GCF funding, so that we can be helpful, so that people coming to us can get their projects done, because there's no point going to an AE and it taking years, and at the end of the day you have little to show for it but frustration. We don't want to be that AE. We want to be very much in the team environment. We will work with you to get us to where you need to go as quickly as possible.
Well, that's very inspirational, and it's really exciting to hear about the projects that you have and the concept notes and what you want to do in the future. Karl, I've so enjoyed learning about the accreditation process of Camco. So much work put in and well done to you and all the team there. Before we start wrapping up, I wonder if you'd indulge me and share a few personal things in order to bring a human element to the world of climate finance in general. So I'd like to ask you, in this COVID-19 era, what new habits or things have you taken up during this time?
Well, I live up here in Helsinki, and normally I'm lucky enough in the winter to travel to one of our warmer offices on occasions. Having been here for the whole winter, I thought it was time that I took up cross-country skiing. It hasn't been necessarily an elegant process, but I'm now sort of up and running and in forward motion, and heading through the forest, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a beautiful way to see the countryside, but still a long way to go on that one.
I love hearing about the non-elegant process. I have to ask though, I'm a big podcast fan. What's your favorite podcast or podcast? What do you listen to?
That is probably the most difficult question that you've asked me so far, because I'm a complete podcast freak. There is the traditional BBC Thinking Aloud and In Our Time, which I always learn something from. I love this woman-led podcast from the States about the inside of the military called Bombshell. But probably the favorite, the one that I look forward to the most Friday morning, is the Slate Political Gabfest. And that has been a staple. I think it's been around for 15 years now. That has been a staple of my Friday mornings for a long time now. The one insight you need to the craziness of American politics.
Great. I'll have to check that out, and I love the name Bombshell, so I'll definitely have to check that out. Great. And if you had a magic wand and you could have a wish with regards to climate change or finance, what would that be? What would it look like?
My magic wand, and I think it would apply beyond climate finance, is to expand people's circle of self and reduce people's circle of otherness. I feel that a lot of the reticence around climate finance is because at times the recipients of it in an ideal economic world are viewed as other. And this is the same problem we have with political discourse at the moment. It's the same problem that we have with Brexit and immigration. I would love people to include in their definition of self people who are from different places, who speak different languages, different ethnicities, different genders, and just realize that, we're all on this planet together, and 99.9% of other human beings are kind of just like you and decent folk. Yeah.
Thanks so much. We're going to wrap this up. Is there anything final, any final thoughts or any final comments that you have to say about this process? Thank you so much for taking the time to unpack this. I think it's a fascinating journey of what you guys have put into place, what you're doing, and what you want to accomplish. But any final thoughts maybe that you have?
I think that perhaps a reverse shout out to the private sector observers and the civil society observers, and the role that the private sector has to play working with the GCF. I think that, we're all on the same page that we need to fund a transition. And I think that most of us are on the same page that really requires the mobilization of private finance. And that doesn't mean a profit motive above all else. I think that we are an organization that is a private entity that is very focused on impact and people and transformation. And I think that the private sector can really play, well, has to play a key role here. And we're grateful that there is a CMIA out there, that there are private sector observers, that there is a private sector facility, because that to us is the future. And we would just like to do our little part in that bigger picture and show how private finance and public finance in the form of the GCF can be combined to address what is, the challenge of our times. So I guess thank you, Margaret-Ann, for this opportunity and for all the work that you do with the GCF.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me, Karl, today. It's been a very insightful discussion on what it takes to become a delivery partner of the GCF. And I'm delighted that we get to continue our conversation offline through our work together at the Climate Markets and Investment Association, as well as GCF activities. I look forward to Camco's continued success. Thanks again.